Should we all go plant-based because animal foods build up TMAO in the body? Hey, this is Josh from Vitality Maximize, and now series on plant-based diets, a reason why plant-based dieters have against eating animal protein, which is TMAO. What's TMAO? TMAO stands for trimethylamine and oxide. It's an oxidized metabolite, a product of plant and animal decomposition. The literature says that they are generated by various gut bacteria when they metabolize choline, betaine, and L-Carnitine. Choline and L-Carnitine are nutrients predominantly found in animal foods, particularly eggs and organ meats, while betaine can be found in beets and broccoli. Other determinants of TMAO production is at the liver with the enzyme flavin monooxygenase, as well as the kidney's ability to reabsorb or not reabsorb TMAO. Within the nutrition debate, the plant-based dieters assert that foods rich in choline, L-Carnitine, betaine, typically predominantly found in animal foods, increase TMA production, being trimethylamine, which lead to TMAO production, which lead to chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, impaired kidney function, and cancer. Hence, animal foods induces chronic disease via TMAO. Is that a leg to stand on? Let's explore. Upon extensive review of the literature, some studies show a very weak association between elevated TMAO and chronic diseases, while others had a little stronger association with the TMAO levels and chronic disease manifestation. These studies that I'm going to mention right now, or the studies that I found that had very little or a fair amount of association, they are in the links in the show notes, as well as every other study that has influenced my ability to perform this video on TMAO. One other study also investigated whether food sources of choline had any association with all-cause mortality. The association was extremely weak. So if you took the time to read at least the abstract results and conclusions, in the show notes you'll find a few consistent trends across the research that I've just shared. One has to be with the strength of association. In order for A to be associated with B, in statistics there's something called the hazard risk ratio. It's just basically how likely is one group going to manifest something than the other group, basically. And most of the studies that I shared had hazard risk ratios that were like less than 2, and when those things are less than 2, it's not a very strong association, and a lot more questions will have to be asked if a hazard risk ratio is less than 2. If it is more than 2, that is something that we might probably need to investigate further, probably a more need of controlled studies or randomized controlled trials. So this was one problem. There wasn't enough consistency just with just TMAO levels and the risk of chronic diseases or a chronic disease. Secondly, speaking of chronic diseases, most of these studies were done on people with advanced chronic diseases. So that means those with already advanced chronic diseases have, they have suboptimal function anyway, whether it's with their cardiovascular system or their liver or their kidneys, whatever it may be. Very little information as well was brought up over what they were eating. So it's very, so there was not a lot you could glean from this. So given that there was not a lot to glean, I had to dig up some more studies regarding food sources of L-Carnitine, Choline, and Betaine. There was this study in 2015 where red meat increased plasma and urinary excretion of TMAO, and that's all that just happened, but it did not indicate the pathogenesis or the onset of various health conditions that were done on people who didn't have any reported illness. And then a 2013 study by the England New Journal of Medicine, 40 adults were fed some eggs and some phosphatidylcholine. The studies did show that when they ate the eggs and the choline, the plasma, TMAO, rose a little bit and then returned to baseline before the treatment of antibiotics. What was all really interesting in that study is that there was this group called the labeled TMAO, and they didn't have their TMAO rise until about the 4th or 5th hour, significantly. So this raised a few flags here. My understanding about when it comes to how food may influence one's plasma metabolite is that, let's say you just eat something, and especially something that has carbohydrates. Typically, your insulin levels or your blood sugar levels will rise because you ate, and then it'll go down to baseline after a few hours. That's typically a normal response to eating something. However, in this study, with the labeled TMAO group, the TMAO didn't rise until the 4th or 5th hour. So, more questions need to be asked about that study, particularly. So, overall, to me, there has been not one conclusive study so far that could find a strong association nor a causative pattern between foods, between meats, which are typically rich in carnitine and choline, betaine, and elevated TMAO levels, and the presence and onset of chronic diseases. So far, there's only been a weak association between TMAO levels and the already existing presence of chronic diseases, and that meat eating may or may not consistently raise plasma TMAO. So we have to beg the question, what actually causes TMAO levels to rise? As stated earlier in the video, I mentioned that TMA, trimethylamine, has to be converted to trimethylamine and oxide, TMAO, and is mediated by the enzyme FMO, otherwise known as flavin monooxygenase. So, what influences maybe the enzyme flavin monooxygenase, and also the elevation of the TMAO metabolite? So there are a couple that I found that was really interesting. One had to do with the health of the liver. The reason for this is because the liver is the primary site of cholesterol and bile acid metabolism. So any alterations with that typically may raise the TMAO levels. I'll leave some studies for you to investigate further if you wish. Second, we also have to look at the function of the kidneys. A 2016 study by the PLOS1 found that a reduced glomerular filtration rate impairs the clearance of TMAO, which leads to the reabsorption of TMAO in the kidneys. So that's an interesting one. Third has to do with iron homeostasis. There has been some interesting relationships between the FMO enzymes and the mechanisms that regulate iron in the body. There was a study that I found an inverse trend between transferrin levels and TMAO levels. Transferrin is an iron transport protein, and ironically, manganese and aluminum, two metals in our Earth's crust, transfer through the same protein as well in the human body. I'll leave any other further research for you to take a look at. The next one has to do with what you may call excessive tissue breakdown and stress. The thing about external stress is that it catabolizes protein and activates a pathway called the unfolded protein response. Simply, what that just means is that it unfolds proteins, and on the unfolding of protein inhibits protein synthesis. So in order for you to stop cannibalizing yourself, reducing and inhibiting the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, can reduce TMAO levels and promote protein synthesis. Last one, wound healing. It seems that TMAO levels rise if you experience some sort of a tissue injury. Let's say you get cut or something like that and blood spills out. Things like histamine, platelets, other immune and inflammatory response cells swarm in to create a clot to prevent blood from leaving the body. I did find an interesting 2017 study that showed that there was a trend between TMAO levels and platelet hyperreactivity. So as we go back to the question, should we avoid meats because of their choline, carnitine and betaine content to reduce TMAO levels so that you can be quote unquote healthier and not have chronic disease? The short and simple answer is no. High TMAO levels is a marker at chronic diseases at best. They are not the cause of the onset of chronic diseases. TMAO, in my view, is just a sign of liver and kidney stress. And the nutrients choline, betaine and carnitine are important nutrients, especially for the function of the liver, the nervous system, the kidneys, the cardiovascular system, etc. Carnitine, for instance, does maintain skeletal and cardiac muscle function. Choline is a precursor to acetylcholine, important for the brain and the nervous system, and helps with things like memory and skill acquisition. And betaine is one of the most important nutrients for optimizing methylation. Avoiding these foods and supplements in these nutrients would be extremely daft So thank you for your time. If you like our content, please don't forget to like this video, smash that subscribe button on YouTube and Odyssey, share this content with your friends who either maybe a plant-based dieter, or maybe you need some weapons to debate a plant-based dieter if you have to do so. So and yeah, take care, and signing off.